They tell the story of emancipation like it ended the struggle, like freedom arrived whole and complete. But when slavery collapsed, 4 million newly freed black Americans asked a single question: how do we survive now? Freedom without land meant freedom without food, shelter, or protection, and everyone knew it, including the federal government. In January 1865, as the Civil War was ending, Union General William Tecumseh Sherman met with 20 black ministers and leaders in Savannah, Georgia. These were men who had lived through slavery, escape, and war, and when Sherman asked what black people needed most, their answer was clear and unanimous: land. Not charity, not wages, not supervision, but land they could farm, own, and pass down to their children. Days later, Sherman issued Special Field Order No. 15, a military order that confiscated 400,000 acres of coastal land stretching across Georgia and South Carolina. The land was divided into plots of 40 acres, reserved exclusively for formerly enslaved families. Army mules, no longer needed for war, were sometimes loaned to help families work the land, and just like that, a phrase was born: 40 acres and a mule. By the spring of 1865, nearly 40,000 black families had settled on this land. They built homes, planted crops, formed communities, and for the first time in American history, formerly enslaved people were landowners. This was not a rumor or a dream. It was official policy, enforced by the Union Army and supported by the newly created Freedmen's Bureau, which was tasked with helping freed families transition into independence. For a brief moment, something revolutionary happened. Black Americans were not just free, they were becoming economically independent. Land ownership meant food security, bargaining power, education, and generational stability. It meant the difference between freedom and survival. Then Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. His successor, Andrew Johnson, was a Southern slaveholder who believed land belonged back in the hands of white former Confederates. By the end of 1865, Johnson ordered that confiscated land be returned to its original owners, even if black families were already living on it, farming it, and depending on it to survive. Union troops were sent back, not to protect freed families, but to remove them. Black families were forcibly evicted from land they had been promised by the United States government. Crops were seized, homes were burned or dismantled. The promise was revoked quietly, efficiently, and completely. The same government that had handed them land months earlier now told them to leave. What replaced it was sharecropping, a system designed to look like employment, but function like bondage. Families worked land they did not own, borrowed tools they could never repay, and stayed trapped in debt generation after generation. Freedom existed, but ownership did not. The consequences were enormous. 40 acres could have created millions of black landowners, stabilized families after slavery, and built generational wealth at the foundation of American society. Instead, that wealth was redirected back into the hands of former slaveholders, while freed people were left landless in a nation where land meant power. By the early 1900s, black Americans had clawed back some land on their own, only to lose much of it again through violence, fraud, and discriminatory laws. The promise that could have changed everything was never replaced. So when people ask why wealth gaps exist, why land ownership matters, why freedom did not lead to equality, the answer begins here. With a promise written into military orders, enforced on the ground, lived by tens of thousands of families, and then deliberately undone, 40 acres was not a myth, it was policy, and taking it back reshaped American history.